A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 5. The Anchorite of the Adyar River. The hands race across my watch. The weeks move across the face of my calendar, while I work my way southwards across the Deccan Plateau. I visit several remarkable places, but find few remarkable men. Some inscrutable impelling force, which I cannot understand but which I blindly obey, hurries my pace so that sometimes I rush onwards as though I am a tourist. At last, I am on the train to Madras, where I intend to halt and establish myself for a while. During the long night journey, when sleep is difficult to procure, I take count of the invisible gains which I have reaped during these travels in Western India. I force myself to confess that so far I have not tracked down any yogi about whose discovery I can feel unduly elated. As for the thought of finding a rishi, that now lies in the remote depths of my mind. On the other hand, I have seen enough of the gross superstitions and suffocating customs of sleepy India to make me realize that the skepticism and warnings of some chance Bombay acquaintances are well justified. I realize too that my self-imposed task will be difficult of fulfillment. Pious men are here in all their 57 varieties, but they do not provide sufficient attraction. One wanders by temples whose mysterious interiors seem to promise much. I cross the sacred precincts and stand at the threshold. I peep inside and behold the fantastic worshippers who toll a bell as they pray, that their prayers may not escape the ears of their chosen deity. I am glad to reach Madras, whose straggling and colourful appearance appeals to me, and I settle in a charming suburb about 2 miles outside the city, so as to get easier contact with the Indian rather than the European element. My house is in the street of the Brahmins. The road is choked with a thick layer of sand, into which my shoes readily sink. The sidewalk is made of beaten earth. Everything is free from the improving touch of the 20th century. The whitewashed houses have pillared porches and open verandas. In the interior of mine, there is a tiled courtyard, around which runs a covered gallery. Our water is hauled up by a bucket from an old well. The luxuriant tropical scenery which unfolds as soon as one gets away from the 2 or 3 streets which compose the suburb affords me perpetual delight. Soon I discover that the Adyar River is less than half an hour's walk away. There are several shady palm groves near this wide stream, and they take my fancy. I spend my spare time loitering among them or walk for a few miles beside the languid water. The Adyar River flows down to Madras, of which city it forms the southern boundary, and then joins the ocean amid the ceaseless rise and fall of the Coromandel surf. Alongside this beautiful stream, I slowly amble one morning, accompanied by a Brahmin acquaintance, who learns where my interests lie. After some time, he suddenly seizes my arm. "Look," he exclaims, "do you see that young man who's approaching us? He is known to be a yogi. He would interest you, but alas, he never talks to us. Why not? I know where he lives, but he's the most reserved man in the whole district." By this time the stranger has almost reached us. He possesses an athletic figure, and I judge him to be about 35. He is slightly above medium height. What strikes me most, however, is the negroid character of his face. The skin has darkened to a shade of black, and the broad, flat nose, the thick lips, and muscular frame all betoken non-Aryan blood. His long, neatly plaited hair is gathered around the crown of his head in a sort of top knot. He wears a peculiar kind of large earring. A white shawl is wrapped around his body and then flung across the left shoulder. The legs are bare and the feet uncovered. He completely ignores us and paces onwards with slow steps. His eyes are downcast, as though intent on searching the ground. One gathers the impression that the mind behind those eyes is pondering over some matter. What, I wonder, is the subject of this walking meditation? He piques and arouses my interest still further. An intense desire to break down the barriers which separate us grips me suddenly. I want to talk to him. Let us turn back, I suggest. The Brahman protests firmly. It is useless. At least I can try, I answer. The Brahmin again endeavors to dissuade me. That man is so inaccessible that we know hardly anything of him. He keeps himself quite aloof from his neighbors. We must not interfere with him. But I am already moving in the reputed yogi's direction, and my companion has perforce to follow me. We are soon behind the other man, who gives no sign of his awareness of our presence, but continues to pace slowly onward. We follow with parallel steps. Please ask if I may converse with him, I tell my companion. The latter hesitates and then shakes his head. No, I dare not, he declares weakly. The unpleasant possibility that I might be missing a valuable contact stirs me to further effort. There is no alternative but to address the yogi myself. I throw all conventions, Hindu and European, to the wind, stand directly in his path and face him. I try a brief sentence out of my slight stock of Hindustani. He looks up. There is a half smile around his mouth, but he makes a negative gesture of the head. At this time I know only a single word of Tamil, which is the vernacular of Madras, and doubtless the yogi knows even less of English. Few people know Hindustani in the south, but of this fact I am not yet aware. Fortunately, the Brahmin begins to feel that he cannot leave me so helpless, and advances to the rescue. In a hesitant, apologetic voice, he says something in Tamil. The yogi does not reply. His face hardens. The eyes become cold and unfriendly. The Brahmin looks at me embarrassed. A prolonged pause follows. Neither of us knows what to do. I realize ruefully what a difficult task it is to help hermits to find their tongues. They dislike being interviewed, and they do not wish to talk to strangers about their intimate experiences. They dislike especially being asked to break their chronic silence for the sake of a sun-helmeted white man who is tacitly assumed to possess neither sympathy with nor understanding of the subtleties of yoga. This feeling is succeeded by another. I become strangely aware of a penetrating inspection on the yogi's part. Somehow I sense that he is mentally probing my innermost thoughts. Yet outwardly, he remains aloof, indifferent. Am I mistaken? But I cannot shake off this weird feeling that I have become a kind of human microscopical specimen. The Brahmin becomes very nervous and nudges me as a hint to be off. Another minute and I shall yield to his silent importunity and go away defeated. The yogi makes a sudden gesture of his hand, leads us towards a tall palm tree close by, and silently bids us sit down at its foot. He then drops to the ground himself. He addresses some Tamil words to the Brahmin. I notice that his voice possesses a peculiar resonance and a quality which is almost musical. The yogi says that he is willing to converse with you, my companion interprets, and then volunteers the statement that the other man has peregrinated and unfrequently part of the river for some years. The first thing I asked is the man's name, whereupon I hear such a lengthy string of appellations that I immediately question him anew. It appears that his first name is Brahma Sugananda, that he possesses 4 other names, all equally long or longer, and that the only useful thing to do to be call him Brahma. If I am to give all 5 of the names, the words would stretch right across this page. So many letters are there in each name. I am both awed and appalled at the length of the young man's patronymic. It is therefore better to maintain a discreet silence about them and make matters easier for unacclimatized readers by referring to him henceforth as Brahma, the shorter name which I bestow on him in conversation. Please tell him that I am interested in yoga and wish to know something about it, I say. The yogi nods his head on hearing the translated statement. Yes, I can see that, he replies with a smile. Let the Sahib ask questions. What kind of yoga practice do you follow? Mine is the system of body control. It is the most difficult of all the yogas. Body and breath must be fought as though they were obstinate mules, and they must be conquered. Thereafter, the nerves and mind are more easily controlled. What benefit do you get from it? Brahma gazes across the river. Health of the body, strength of the will, length of years. These are few benefits, he says. The yogi who has become a master in the training which I follow brings the flesh to iron-hard endurance. Pains do not move him. I know one who submitted to an operation at the hands of a surgeon when no sleep-giving drug could be used. He endured it without a murmur. Such a one can also experience in his unprotected body the most intense cold, yet receive no hurt. I whip out my notebook, for I perceive that our conversation is likely to prove more interesting than I anticipated. Brahma smiles again at my stenography, but does not object. Tell me more about your yoga system, I beg him. My master has lived on the open mountains of the Himalayas, surrounded by snow and ice and wearing a cinnamon-colored robe for his only comfort. He can sit down for several hours at a stretch in a place where it is so cold that water instantly freezes. Yet he will feel no distress. Such is the power of our yoga. You are a disciple then? Yes. There are still many hills to climb. I have given 12 years of unstopping effort to practice our exercises every day. And you have attained some unusual powers? Brahma nods his head but maintains a stolid silence. I am intrigued more and more by this strange young man. Is it permissible to ask how you became a yogi? I query, somewhat uncertainly. At first, there is no answer. We 3 continue to squat under the fronded palm. I hear the hoarse cries of errant crows among a group of coconut trees on the opposite bank of the river. Mingling with this noise comes the fitful chatter of a few monkeys who explore the treetops. From the shore rises the quiet plash of the water. Most willingly, comes Brahma's sudden reply. I think he realizes that my questions are prompted by something deeper than mere academic curiosity. He hides his hand beneath his shawl, fixes his gaze upon some object on the other side of the river, and begins to speak. I was a quiet and lonely child. There was no pleasure for me in the usual habits of children. I did not care to play with the others, but liked to wander alone in gardens or in the fields. Few people understood a brooding boy, and I cannot say that I was happy with life. About the age of 12, I happened, by mere chance, to overhear the conversation of some older persons, and it was through their talk that I first discovered the existence of yoga. This event aroused in me a desire to learn more of the matter. I began to inquire into it among several people, and in this way was able to get a few books in Tamil, which revealed many interesting things about the yogis. As a horse riding through a desert thirsts for water, so did my mind thirst for still further knowledge about them. But I came to a point where it seemed impossible to get to know more. One day I reread, as if by chance, a sentence in one of my books. It was, "To succeed on the path of yoga, one must have a personal teacher." These words now made a tremendous impression on me. I felt that only by leaving home and traveling about could I find a suitable teacher. To this course my parents would not give permission. Not knowing what else to do, I began to practice in secret some breathing exercises, about which I had collected some scraps of information. These practices did not help me. Instead, they injured me. I did not then realize that without the guidance of an expert teacher, it is not safe for anyone to do them. But my eagerness was such that I could not wait till I met a teacher. Within a few years, the effect of these breathing exercises showed itself. A small rupture made its appearance on the top of my head. It seemed that the skull was broken in its weakest spot. Anyway, blood streamed from the wound and my body became cold and numb. I thought I was dying. 2 hours later, a strange vision crossed my mind's eye. I seemed to see the figure of a venerable yogi who addressed me, saying, "You now see what a dangerous condition you have brought yourself into by these forbidden practices. Let this be a severe lesson to you." The vision disappeared, and peculiarly enough, from that moment my state grew better and I completely recovered. But the scar remains still. Brahma bends his head so as to show the crown to our eyes. A tiny rounded scar is plainly visible on his poll. After this unfortunate experience, I gave up breathing exercises and waited for some years until home ties were looser. He goes on. When my opportunity for freedom came, I left home and went out in search of a teacher. I knew that the best way to test a teacher is to live with him for a few months. I found several teachers and divided my time between staying with them for a while and returning home disappointed. Some were the heads of monasteries, others were the chiefs of institutions of spiritual learning, but somehow none of them satisfied me. They gave me plenty of philosophy, but little from their own experience. Most of them could only repeat what the book said. They could offer no really practical guidance. I did not want book theories so much as a practical experience of yoga. Thus, I visited no less than 10 teachers, but they did not seem to be the real yoga masters. I did not despair, though. My youthful eagerness burnt more strongly, for rebuffs only increased my determination to succeed. I was now at the gate of manhood. I resolved to leave the home of my father forever, to renounce the worldly life and to search till death for a true master. I then set out from home on my 11th wandering or pilgrimage. I moved about until I came to a large village in the district of Tanjore. I went down to the riverside for my morning bath and afterwards walked along the bank. Soon I came to a small shrine built of red stone, or rather it was a miniature temple. I peered inside out of curiosity and was surprised to see a number of men gathered in a circle around a man who was almost nude. In fact, he was wearing only a cod piece. The men were looking at him with expressions of the utmost respect. There was something venerable, dignified, and mysterious in the face of the central figure. I remained at the entrance, awed and fascinated. I soon gathered that the little meeting was receiving some kind of instruction, and I had a strong feeling that the man in the center was a real yogi. a genuine master and not merely a book-filled scholar. I cannot explain why I felt that. Suddenly, the teacher turned his face towards the door and our eyes met. I then obeyed my inner urge and walked into the temple. The teacher greeted me warmly, bade me sit down, and said, "6 months ago I was directed to take you as a pupil. Now you have come." I remembered with a pleasant shock that it was exactly 6 months since I left home to begin my 11th journey. However, it was thus that I met my master. Thereafter I accompanied him wherever he travelled. Sometimes he would go into the towns, sometimes he would withdraw into secluded forests or lonely jungles. With his help I began to make good progress upon the path of yoga, and I was satisfied at last. My teacher was a yogi of great experience, though the path he followed was that of body control. There are several systems of yoga. They are very different in their methods and exercises, and the system I was taught is the only one which begins with the body instead of the mind. I was also taught how to obtain breath control. On one occasion I had to fast for 40 days to prepare myself to receive one of the yogic powers. You may imagine how surprised I was one day when my teacher sent for me and said, "The life of total withdrawal from the world is not yet for you. Go back to your people and live a normal life. You will marry and have one child. At the age of 39, certain signs will be given you, and after that you will find yourself free to retire from the world again. You will then go to the forest and practice solitary meditation until you reach the goal which every yogi seeks. I shall be waiting for you, and you can return to me." I obeyed his commands and returned to my native place. In due course I married a faithful and devoted woman who bore me one child, exactly as my teacher had predicted. But not long after, my wife died. My parents were no longer living, so I left my native town and came here to stay in the house of an old widow who also comes from there and who knew me as a child. She looks after my domestic needs, and yet, because the years have made her discreet, she permits me to live the reserved existence which the rules of our school enjoin. Brahma ceases talking, and I am so impressed by his narrative that my questioning tongue is likewise stilled. There are 2 or 3 minutes of complete silence, and then the yogi rises, turns his face homewards, and begins to walk slowly. The Brahmin and myself follow him. Our path leads through lovely palm groves and through pretty clumps of casuarina. The river shines in the bright sunlight, and an hour or so is passed pleasantly as we stroll along its banks. Anon we begin to enter the haunts of men. Fisherfolk wade into the water to carry on their work in the ancient way, for they fish neither from boats nor from the shore, but stand waist high in the stream and hold their nets and baskets. The beauty of the scene is enhanced by the brightly plumed birds which flutter down to the river. The air is slightly scented by a gentle breeze, which blows pleasantly in our faces from the direction of the sea. We reach a road where I leave the river regretfully. A herd of squeaking pigs passes us. They are under the care of a grey-haired, low-caste woman who hits unfortunate stragglers with a bamboo stick. Brahma turns eventually to bid us farewell. I express the hope that I may be allowed to see him again. He assents. I then venture to ask whether I may have the honor of a visit from him. To the great surprise of my Brahmin companion, the yogi readily agrees to call in the evening. With the fall of dusk, I await Brahma's arrival somewhat eagerly. Several questions tumble over each other in my mind. His brief autobiography has intrigued me, while his strange character has puzzled me. When the servant announces him, I descend the few steps which lead from the veranda and hold up my hands with palms touching as a token of welcome. The symbolism of this common Hindu greeting, which I have soon learnt, will appear quaint to the Western mind, for the gesture indicates, my soul and yours are one. The Hindus delight to receive it from a European, which reveals the rarity of that event, though it is nothing more than the Indian substitute for shaking hands. I want to be accepted as one with friendly intent, and therefore I try to respect the Indian customs and conventions so far as I am aware of them. This does not mean that I am going to turn native. I have no such purpose, but that I believe in treating others as I would have them treat me. Brahma accompanies me into the large room and immediately squats cross-legged on the floor. Will you not sit on the divan? I ask him through the interpreter. It is well cushioned and extremely comfortable. But no, he prefers the hard floor. And Indian floors are laid with tiles, not boards. I express my gratitude for his visit and offer him some food, which he accepts and eats in silence. After the meal, I feel that I must tell him something about myself, something that will explain my sudden intrusion into his existence. And so I enter into a brief account of the forces which drew me to India. At its close, Brahma emerges from the bulwark of aloofness behind which he has so far hidden, and puts his hand on my shoulder in a friendly way. That such men should exist in the West, it is pleasant to hear. You have not wasted your journey, for you shall learn much. It is a happy day for me that destiny brought our feet to the same spot. Whatever you wish to know, ask, and so far as my oaths permit me, I shall gladly tell you. This sounds like good luck indeed. I ask him about the nature of his yoga system, its history, and its aims. Who dare say how old is the system of body control which I have studied? Our secret texts declare that it was revealed by the god Shiva to the sage Gheranda. From his lips it was learnt by the sage Martyanda, who then taught it to others, and thus it came down in a continuous line through thousands of years. But how many thousands we neither know nor care, though we believe that it is the last of the yoga sciences that was born in antiquity. Such was the decline of man even in those days that the gods had to give him a way of spiritual salvation which led purely through the body. The yoga of body control is little understood except by the adepts who have mastered it, and the common people possess the most false notions of our ancient science. And since such adepts are, alas, so infrequently to be found today, the most foolish and distorted practices pass as our system without hindrance among the multitude. Go to Benares and you will see a man who sits all day and sleeps all night on a bed of sharp spikes, and in another place you will see a man who holds one arm aloft in the air until it is half withered from disuse and until the nails are several inches long. You will be told that they are men who practice our system of yoga, but it is not so. Such men bring shame on it, rather. Our aim is not to torture the body in foolish ways for the sake of public wonder. These self-torturing ascetics are ignorant men who have picked up by hearsay or from some friendly person a few exercises in the forced contortion of the body. But since they know not what are our objects, they distort these practices and prolong them unnaturally. Yet the common people venerate such fools and bestow food and money upon them. But are they to blame? If the real yogis make themselves so scarce and keep their methods so secret, then misunderstandings will surely arise, I object. Brahma draws up his shoulders and a scornful expression passes across his mouth. Does a Raja keep his jewels on the highway for public display? He asks. No, He hides them in the treasure chambers deep down in the walls of his palace. The knowledge of our science is one of the greatest treasures a man can have. Is he to offer it in the bazaar for all and sundry? Whoever desires to grasp this treasure, let him search for it. That is the only way. But it is the right way. Our texts enjoin secrecy again and again, while our masters will reveal the important teachings only to tested disciples who have been faithful to them for some years at least. Ours is the most secret of all the yogas. It is full of grave dangers, not only to the disciple himself, but to others. Think you that I am allowed to reveal any but its most elementary doctrines to you? Or even those without extreme desertion? I see. But there is a branch of our science about which I may talk to you more freely. It is that wherein we strengthen the will and improve the body of beginners, for only so they can be fit to attempt the difficult practices of real yoga. Ah, that would interest the West. We have nearly a score of body exercises which strengthen the different parts and organs and remove or prevent certain diseases. Some of them are postures which press upon special nerve centers. These in turn affect certain organs which are not working properly and help to put them right. Do you use medicines? Certain herbs plucked under a waxing moon are used if necessary. We have 4 kinds of exercises or methods to accomplish this early work of putting the body's health in good order. First, we learn the art of repose so that the nerves may be soothed. For that, there are 4 suitable exercises. Then we learn the stretches, which are exercises copied from the natural stretching of healthy animals. Third, we clean the body thoroughly by a variety of methods which may seem very curious to you, but which are indeed excellent in their effect. Lastly, we study the art of breathing and its control. I express a desire to receive a demonstration of some exercises. There is no dark secret in those which I shall show you now. Brahma smiles. Let us begin with the art of repose. We can learn something of this matter from the cat. Our master places a cat in the circle of his pupils and gets them to notice how graceful the animal becomes when in repose. He instructs them to observe it carefully when the midday heat sends it to sleep. He tells them to watch it closely when it crouches in front of a mouse hole. He makes it clear to them that the cat sets a perfect example of true rest, and that it knows how to store and keep every bit of strength. You imagine that you know how to rest, but really you do not. You sit in that chair for a while, then move from side to side, then fidget, and then sprawl out your legs. Though you do not rise from the chair and outwardly seem to be at ease, one thought after another races through your brain. Can you call that repose? Is it not a way of being active still? That is a point of view which has never occurred to me, I say. Animals know how to rest themselves, but not many men have this knowledge. This is because animals are guided by instinct, which is the voice of nature, while men are guided by their thoughts. And since men largely lack control over their brains, their nerves and bodies are affected as a result. There is little real repose for them. What must we do then? The first thing you must learn is nothing more than the Oriental form of sitting. Chairs may indeed be useful in the cold rooms of your northern countries, but you must learn to do without them during the times of exercise which shall prepare you for yoga. Our way of sitting is really most restful. After working or walking, it gives peace to the entire body. The easiest way for you to learn it is to place a small rug or mat before the wall of your room. Sit upon this as comfortably as you can and use the wall to support your back. Or you can place the mat in the center of the room and then use a couch or chair to lean against. After that, bend the legs inwards at the knees and cross the feet. There need be no feeling of strain and you must not tighten the muscles. So your first exercise will be to sit like that and keep your body quite still, except for the effort of gentle breathing. And having got into that position, you must promise yourself that you will withdraw your thoughts from all worldly burdens and affairs. Just rest your mind on a beautiful object, a picture or a flower. I leave my easy chair and drop on the floor, facing Brahma, assuming the attitude he has just described. It is the position of an old-time tailor sitting cross-legged at his work. Yes, you do it easily, observed Brahma, but other Europeans may not find it comfortable because they are not accustomed to it. You have one fault. Keep your backbone straight, not bent. Let me show you another of our exercises. Brahma proceeds to raise his knees towards his chin, though still keeping his feet crossed. This position draws his feet away somewhat from the trunk. He clasps his hands around the front of his knees. This position is very restful after you've been standing on your legs for a long time. Be careful to throw most of the body's weight upon the seat. You may practice this for a few minutes whenever you feel very tired. It will soothe important nerve centers. It is extremely simple anyway. We need nothing complicated to learn the art of repose. In fact, our easiest exercise gives excellent results. Lie flat on your back, legs stretched out side by side. Turn the toes outward. Let your hands be extended and rest them alongside the body. Relax every muscle. Close the eyes. Give your whole weight to the floor. You cannot do this exercise properly in a bed as it's important to keep the backbone extremely flat. Use a rug laid upon the floor. In this attitude, nature's healing forces will rest you. We call this the corpse position. By practice, you may learn to rest in any of these attitudes for an hour if you wish. They take away tension of muscle and soothe nerves. Repose of muscle comes before repose of mind. Really, your exercises seem to consist of nothing more than sitting still in some way or other? Is that nothing? You Westerners thirst to be active, but is repose to be despised? Do calm nerves possess no meaning? Repose is the beginning of all yoga, but it is not our need alone. It is also the need of your world. Brahma's words are not without justification. Those exercises are enough for this evening, he adds. I must go. I thank him for what he has told me and beg for further instruction. Tomorrow morning you may find me along the river, he replies. Gathering his white shawl around his shoulders, he touches his palms in farewell and is gone. I am left to ruminate upon the interesting conversation which has so abruptly ended. I meet the yogi again on many occasions. At his desire, I intercept him on his morning walks, but when I can cajole him indoors, he spends his evenings with me. Those evenings prove extremely fruitful for me and my quest, because he unfolds a more arcane knowledge when the moon displays herself than he is willing to unfold under a high sun. A little inquiry enables me to solve a point which has puzzled me for a while. I have been under the impression that the Hindus are a brown race. Why, then, is Brahma's skin dark to the point of negroid blackness? The answer is that he belongs to an indigenous population which appears to be India's first inhabitant. When the Aryans, India's earliest invaders, broke through the mountains in the northwest thousands of years ago and descended into the plains, they found this native race of Dravidians and drove them into the south. These Dravidians remain a separate people to this day, except that they have absorbed the religion of their conquerors. The fiery tropic sun has pigmented their skins almost black, which together with other evidences make certain ethnologists think that they primarily rose out of African stock. As in those early days of their undisputed sway over the entire country, the Dravidians still wear their hair long and tied in a knot behind their heads, and they still speak their primal, half-chanted tongues, of which the most important is Tamil. Brahma makes the confident assertion that the brown invaders took their knowledge of yoga from his own race, just as they took certain other things in addition. But scholarly Hindus to whom I mention this claim deny it as absurd. I, therefore, leave the less important question of origin to settle itself. Because I am not writing a thesis around the subject of yogic physical culture, I do not purpose to describe more than 2 or 3 exercises in the art of adopting and maintaining fixed bodily attitudes, which appears to be so prominent a feature of the yoga of body control. The 20 or more postural methods which Brahma demonstrates, either in a palm-fringed grove or in my more prosaic quarters, involve strangely contorted attitudes, and, to Western eyes at least, must appear either ludicrous or impossible, or both. Some of them require balancing on both knees with feet upturned, or balancing the entire weight of the body upon the tips of one's fingers. Others take the arms behind the back and somehow bring the hands to the front again on the opposite sides. Others again tie up all the limbs in a complicated knot. Still others put the legs around the neck or over the shoulders in acrobatic manner, while a fifth group twist and turn the trunk in the queerest imaginable style. It is while watching Brahma perform some of these feats that I begin to perceive how difficult will this art of yoga be. How many of these exercises comprise your system? I inquire. There are 84 postures in yoga of body control, replies Brahma, though I do not know more than 64 at present. Even as he speaks, he practices one of these postures and sits in it as comfortably as I sit in a chair. Indeed, he tells me that this is his favorite posture. It is not a difficult one, this, but it does seem uncomfortable. His left foot is tucked into the groin and the heel of the other foot is placed under the base of the body, the right leg being doubled back so as to carry most of the weight. What is the use of such a posture? I ask again. If a yogi enters into it and then practices a certain breathing exercise, he will become more youthful. And that breathing exercise? I am not permitted to reveal it to you. What is the object of all these postures then? The mere fact of sitting or standing for regular periods in certain fixed postures may seem of small importance in your eyes. But the concentration of attention and willpower upon the chosen posture is so intense, if success is to be gained, that sleeping forces awaken within the yogi. Those forces belong to the secret realms of nature. Therefore, they are seldom fully aroused until our breathing exercises are also practiced, for the breath possesses deep powers. Though the awakening of such forces is our real aim, no less than a score of our exercises are capable of being used for benefiting one's health or to remove certain diseases, while others will drive impurities out of the body. Is this not of great use? Still other postures are intended to assist our efforts to get control over the mind and soul, for it is a truth that the body influences thought no less than thought influences the body. In the advanced stages of yoga, when we may be plunged for hours in meditation, the proper posture of the body not only enables the mind to remain undistracted in its efforts, but actually assists its purpose. Add to all these things the tremendous gain in willpower which comes to the man who perseveres in these difficult exercises, and you may see what virtues there are in our methods. But why all this twisting and turning? I object. Because there are many nerve centers scattered throughout the body, and each posture affects a different center. Through the nerves, we can influence either the organs of the body or the thoughts in the brain. Those twists enable us to reach nerve centers which otherwise might remain untouched. I see. The basis of this yogic physical culture begins to shape itself in a little more clearly in my mind. It is interesting to ascertain how it compares with the basic principles of our European and American systems. I tell Brahma about the existence of the latter. I do not know your Western systems, but I have seen white soldiers being drilled at the great camp near Madras. By watching them, I have understood what their instructors wish to do. Strengthening the muscles seems to have been their first object, because you Westerners find your greatest virtues in being bodily active. Therefore, you make much use of the limbs in a most energetic manner, repeating those movements again and again. You spend energy vigorously so that you may build up the muscles and receive greater strength in return. That is a good thing to do in the cold countries of the north, doubtless. What is the chief difference between the methods as you see it? Our yoga exercises are really poses and require no further movements after the pose has been taken up. Instead of seeking more energy with which to be active, we seek to increase the power of endurance. You see, we believe that though the development of the muscles may be useful, it is the power which is behind them that is of greater value. Thus, if I tell you that standing on your shoulders in a particular way will wash the brain with blood, soothe the nerves, and remove certain weaknesses, you as a Westerner would probably do the exercise for a moment and repeat it several times with a rush. You may strengthen the muscles which are called into action by this exercise, but you would get little of the benefits which a yogi gets by doing it in his own way. And what may that be? He will do it slowly, with deliberation, and then maintain the position as steadily as he can for some minutes. Let me show you all body posture, as we call it. Brahma lies flat upon his back, hands at sides and legs together. He raises his legs into the air, keeping the knees quite straight until they have attained about 2/3 of a right angle with the floor. He supports his back with his hands, resting the elbows on the floor. The body is then tilted completely upward, his trunk and hips becoming vertical. The chest is brought forward to touch the chin. The hands form a bracket which supports the trunk. The weight of the body is supported by the shoulders and the back of the neck and head. After maintaining this upside-down posture for about 5 minutes, the yogi gets up and explains its value. This posture brings blood flowing down to the brain by its own weight for a few minutes. In the ordinary position, the blood has to be forced upwards by the pumping action of the heart. The difference between the two ways is shown by the soothing effects of the posture upon the brain and nerves. For men who work with their minds, thinkers, and students, the quiet practice of this all-body posture brings quick relief when their brains are tired. This is not its only virtue. It strengthens the sex organs. But these benefits come only if the exercise is done in our way and not in your hasty Western manner. If I am not mistaken, you mean that the yoga attitudes keep the body fixed in a state of poised stillness, whereas our Western exercises violently agitated? Even so, agrees Brahma. A further exercise which I select from Brahma's repertory as being more within the compass of Western limbs is one which should quickly yield to patience and practice. In this posture, the yogi sits with extended legs, raises both arms over his head, and crooks the first fingers. He bends his trunk forward, exhaling the breath while doing so, and grasps the big toes of his feet inside the hooked fingers. The right toe is caught by the right index fingers, and so on. Then he slowly bends his head forward until it falls between his outstretched arms and his forehead lies flat against his thighs. He keeps this position for a little while and then gradually returns to a normal attitude. Do not try to do this all at once, he warns me. Try to bring the head a little closer to the knees, little by little. Even if it takes a few weeks to succeed in this posture, once you have mastered it, it will be yours for years. I learned that this exercise strengthens the spine as indeed one might expect it to do, that it removes nervous troubles caused through spinal weaknesses, and that it will work wonders with blood circulation. In the next posture, Brahma sits on the floor and then doubles his legs up underneath him. Thus, the soles of his feet come under the base of his body. He drops the trunk backward until his shoulders touch the floor. He crosses his arms underneath the back of the head, which is then cushioned upon them. Each hand now grasps the opposite shoulder joint. He remains in this not unshapely pose for some minutes. On emerging from it, he explains that nerve centers situated in the neck and shoulders as well as in the legs are favorably affected by the exercise, and that even the chest is benefited. The average Englishman is so apt to regard the average Indian as a weakling, as a nerve-witted product of tropic sun and underfeeling, that it surprises one to learn that such a carefully thought-out native system of physical culture has existed in India since antiquity. If our Western systems possess such a usefulness that no one would dream of disputing their value at this day, this is not to say that they are consequently complete and that they have pronounced the last word on bodily development, health preservation, and the eradication of disease. Perhaps if the West, with its thorough methods of scientifically directed research, would pick some dust-covered practices out of the traditional teaching of yoga, we might arrive at a computer knowledge of our bodies and a fuller regimen for the healthy life. Yet I know that perhaps not more than a round dozen of the yoga postures are easy enough to be worth our time and trouble. The 70-odd postures which compose the remainder of the system are hardly likely to yield to any except the most enthusiastic, and that only if they are young enough to have flexible limbs and supple bodies. Brahma himself admits, "I have practiced hard each day for 12 years. Only in this way could I master the 64 postures which I know. And then I was fortunate enough to begin while young, for a man of mature years could not even attempt these postures without feeling much pain. Bone, muscle and flesh settle down into stiffened positions in a grown man and can be disturbed only with difficulty and with pain. Yet even then it is remarkable how the postures can be conquered by continued efforts." I do not doubt Brahma's assertion that anyone may master these exercises by persistent practice. Only the slow breakings in of limbs, joints and muscles to the novel positions into which they are introduced must necessarily be such a dilatory process as to embrace the years. He has the advantage of beginning these postures when hardly out of his teens, and the value of this early beginning cannot be overestimated. Just as successful acrobats are usually those who have been trained in childhood, so it is obvious that successful yogis of the school of body control must start their training before the growing period ends, say before 25. I certainly do not know how it is possible for any adult European to adventure with the scores of intricate postures which comprise most of their system without breaking a bone or two in the undertaking. While I argue this with Brahma, he grants only a partial agreement and stubbornly maintains that continued efforts may succeed in many cases, though not in all. But he agrees that Europeans may have a harder task. We Orientals have the advantage of learning to sit with folded legs from childhood. Can a European bend his legs and sit steadily for 2 hours without pain? Yet the crossing of the legs with entwined ankles forms but the beginning of several of our postures. We'll look upon it as one of the best. Shall I show it? Thereupon Brahma assumes that position which has been made familiar to the Western world by the numerous pictures and images of the Buddha. Sitting perfectly erect, he folds the right leg so as to tuck the foot into the left groin. Then he folds the other leg and brings his left foot across to the right thigh, where its heel touches the lower corner of the abdomen. The soles of his feet are turned up. It is an artistic and balanced pose. The thought occurs to me that such an attractive posture may be worth trying. I try to imitate him and am rewarded for my labors with excruciating pains in the ankles. I complain that I cannot achieve this position even for a single moment. How picturesquely exotic has this Buddha seat seemed to me in the past when I have seen it exemplified in some attractive bronze figure which is placed in the window of a curio shop. But how unnatural does this twisting of the lower limbs now seem to me in India when I attempt to exemplify it in my own person. Brahma's smiling encouragement fails to reassure me. I tell him that I must postpone my efforts. Your joints are stiff, he observes. Rub a little oil into the ankles and knees before you practice it again. You are so accustomed to sitting in chairs that the posture will put some strain on your limbs. A little practice every day will slowly remove the difficulty. I doubt whether I could ever do it. Say not that it is impossible. It will take you a long time, but you shall surely master it. Success will take you by surprise one day. It comes suddenly. It is so painful that it feels like a new torture. But the pain will lessen, and though it may take much, I state the fact for what it is worth that, lured by the attractiveness of the Buddha position, I succeeded after sporadic and painful efforts in achieving it 8 months later. Thereafter, the difficulty disappeared. It is necessary to warn amateur dabblers in these yoga posturings against the grave risks they incur. A surgeon to whom I described them said that a strained ankle or a broken tendon are likely injuries. But is it worthwhile for me to attempt it? Assuredly. The lotus posture, for that is what we name it. It is so important that none of our novices are permitted to miss it, however much he is allowed to avoid other postures. It is this chief attitude in which advanced yogis perform their meditations. One reason is that it gives a solid base to the body which is unlikely to topple over should the yogi pass into a deep trance, an event which sometimes occurs unexpectedly, though the adepts can pass into trance at will. You see, the lotus posture locks the feet together and holds the body quiet and steady. A restless and irritated body will disturb the mind, but in the lotus posture one feels poised and self-controlled. In this attitude, it becomes easier to win the power of mind concentration, which is so greatly prized among us. Lastly, we practice our breathing exercises mostly when sitting in this posture, for the combination arouses the spirit fire which sleeps in the body. When this unseeable fire awakens, all the blood in the body is redistributed afresh, while the nerve force is sent with great keenness to certain important points. With this explanation, I remain content and bring our talk of postures to a close. For Brahma has earlier thrown himself into a large number of fearful contortions and convulsive posturings for my edification, just to show me something of his mastery over flesh and bone. What Westerner has the patience to go through all these complicated exercises and master them? What Westerner has even the time to do so? End chapter 5.